1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
How's it going, everyone? Today I'm going to give you 5 great ways to play walking bass lines over the rhythm changes progression. So let's get started. The rhythm changes is a very popular chord progression in jazz music, very common, just as common as the jazz blues. So it's important that we as bass players really know our lines well and can play the changes at any tempo. Now that can be a bit daunting because sometimes this tune or this type of chord progression is called at very, very fast tempos. So let's look at a couple of ways that we can approach the rhythm changes to make our lives a bit easier. So let's look at the form really quickly. The rhythm changes is an AABA form. Each section is 8 bars long. And the A sections are, for the most part, just the same chord progression. It starts off in the key of B flat major with a 1-6-2-5 progression. That's B flat major, G minor 7, sometimes G7, C minor 7, and F7. 1, 6, 2, 5. Same thing in the next 2 bars. 1, 6, 2, 5. Sometimes the 1 chord is substituted for the 3 chord, that would be D minor 7. 3, 6, 2, 5. And in the second line, we get this B flat 7 chord, which is the 5 of the 4 chord. Then we go to the 4 chord. And for our purposes in this lesson, we'll be going to the sharp 4 diminished chord, and then to the 1 chord with the 5 in the bass, and then 6 chord, 2, 5, and then we're back to the top with the next A section, rather. We go on to the next A section from there. Second A section is the same. Basically the same chord progression there. Last A section is the same. The B section is where things change a little bit, but it's where the chords get a bit easier. So in the B section, we have a 3, 6, 2, 5 chord progression, but the difference is every chord's a dominant 7th. So we got D7 for 2 bars, G7 for 2 bars, C7 for 2 bars, and F7 for 2 bars. And then the cycle goes back to the A section again for the last A, and then we just lather, rinse, repeat those chord progressions until we're done. The first approach is just going to use root notes, real simple, and we'll start off with half notes. That's the first exercise. Real simple. Get the sound of the chords in your head first before you try to do anything fancy. The next logical step from there is actually just to play 2 root notes per chord. So now we turn it into a walking bass line, but we're just playing 2 times on each root. Play 4 times on B flat. As you get more and more comfortable with this, you can take these changes a bit higher up the neck. So now I'll go a bit higher up, I'll go to this high F here on the 10th fret of the G string to get some more range into my bass playing. So here we go. For our second approach, we'll be using notes from the key of B flat major. So keeping in mind the root notes that we used from the first exercise, we'll start off with this B flat and we'll try to find a note which is diatonic, which means it's in the key of B flat. It's diatonic to the key of B flat major and it's on either side of the root note we're going to. So what that means is if we're going to G7, we'll start on B flat, on beat 1. On beat 2, before we get to G, we need to play a note that's on either side of that note. So it could be an A down to a G. That's one option. Or it could be F up to G. So let's go B flat, A down to G. Same thing for C. Our 2 options are B flat up to C or D down to C. Same thing for F. Let's say I go to E flat up to F. Going to D minor, maybe I'll go E flat down to D. G7, I'll go to an A down to a G. Maybe I'll now do D down to C. And let's do G down to F. What about A up to B flat? And now I'll do a couple of B flats. I'll just do B flat, 2, 3. Let's say I'll do F down to E flat. I'll do 2 E flats and E. For this chord, I can actually do G down to D. Sorry, G down to F for the B flats chord with the F in the bass. So for this chord, we're not playing the root in the bass, we're playing the 5th in the bass. So we got to find a note that's on either side of that note. So E, E diminished, G, and now we've got to get to G7. I could play 2 Fs, and then go to G, or I could play F, A, and go down to G. Let's be a bit adventurous with this next one. We'll go high D down to C. And what about E flat? High E flat up to F. And then C down to B flat. So that's the idea. This might take a little bit of brain power at first, but you will get used to it pretty quickly with a bit of practice. So let me play a couple of A sections with this approach. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we get to the B section. The third approach is we're going to be using chromatic approach notes. This is the same concept from the previous example, but we're now going to play notes that are a half step on either side of the target root note that we're going to. So, starting on this same B flat, if we want to go to this G, our two options are A flat, half step above, or F sharp, a half step below. Okay, same thing for C. For C minor 7, we can do D flat to C, or we can do B to C, B natural to C. For this F, let's say we go down to the first fret F, we could play G flat down to F, or E natural up to F, B flat 7, B natural down to B flat, or A natural up to B flat. Now the A natural is actually in the chord of F7, but it is still the same approach. So some of these notes will actually be chord tones of the chord that you're playing. Sometimes they won't be. So this approach might sound a little something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. With birds going in the background, always adds to the lines. Now we're getting into the topic of chord substitutions. And there are lots of possible substitutions that can be made in the rhythm changes. The most common substitution, the one that I use the most, is the 3-4-1 chord substitution. What that means, let's take the B flat major 7 chord. These are the notes, B flat, D, F, and A. If we add the 9 on top of that, we get a B flat major 9 chord, B flat, D, F, A, C. And if we lop off the B flat, we get the D minor 7 chord, D, F, A, C. So what we've done is we've substituted the D minor 7 chord in place of the B flat major 7 chord. Now this is a perfectly viable way to substitute chords in jazz music. It happens all the time. And let's apply this approach to the other chords. Let's look at G7. This is the chord, G, B, D, F. There are two possible substitutions we can make here. We can put the natural 9 on top, which is the note A. And if we lop off the G, we get a B minor 7 flat 5 chord. So we can think of that chord in place of G7. The second option is to put the flat 9 on top, A flat, and then when we lop off the G, we get a full diminished chord, B diminished. Those are the two most popular ones for this chord in this tune. We'll go on to the 2 chord now, C minor 7, same approach. That's the arpeggio, add the 9, and take off the C on the bottom. We get an E flat major 7 chord. And for F7, that's the arpeggio. Same types of 9s, we can add the natural 9, G natural, which gives us A minor 7 flat 5 that we can use, or we can use the flat 9 approach, which is G flat on top, which will give us A diminished. So just to recap those, for B flat, sometimes we can play D. For G7, sometimes we can play B with or without this A flat or A natural note. For C minor, we can think of the E flat note, think of an E flat major chord, E flat major 7. For F7, we can think of A minor 7 flat 5, or we can think of A full diminished. So I'll take the pace down for this one, and this is what this might sound like. Let's just do 1A section. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, hopefully you could hear in there. Sometimes I would do the thirds rather than do the root notes. And that's the kind of sound that you can get. Those are the types of lines that you can get when you use this chord substitution approach. For our last approach, we'll be using what's called the tritone substitution. Now we use the tritone substitution for dominant 7th chords. And this is done by substituting one dominant 7th chord for another, the distance of a tritone away. So what that means is, if we get to G7, instead of thinking of G7, we can do a tritone substitution here. We can play, instead of G7, we can play D flat 7. So this note D flat is a tritone above G, so we can make the substitution and play D flat 7 in place of G7. So the real magic of the tritone substitution happens when we use chord progressions that go round using the circle of fourths. And this tune is a perfect example. If we look at bars 3 and 4, where we get the 3, 6, 2, 5 chord progression, so that's the sound of the root notes for the 3, 6, 2, 5 progression. And now if I put the tritone substitution on the G7 and on the F7, we get this line. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now the root motion of the chord progression descends chromatically, which is what happens when we use this tritone substitution. Now this can be really, really handy when it comes to playing the rhythm changes at very, very fast tempos. It means, for one thing, we don't have to move our hand as much because we have more options, but two, we can actually play lines that are really, really close together. For example, if I just play the first A section, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that'll just about wrap it up for today's lesson. I hope this has given you some ideas for your own walking lines over the rhythm changes progression. Thanks for watching the video. If you'd like to download any of the exercises or walking lines from this lesson, please head over to my Patreon page. It's all up there, and it's in both standard and tab notations as usual, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care.